In the summer of 2004, Yellowstone became the silent stage for a disappearance that would later be spoken of in hushed tones. Two young women vanished during what was meant to be a week-long trek through the park's remote northern wilderness. Nearly 2 years passed before one of them stumbled out of the trees, skeletal, confused, clinging to life. Her account shattered long-held assumptions about safety in America's vast protected lands and suggested that the greatest danger did not come from nature itself, but from something hidden within it. Her companion did not survive. Although the women were held for more than 20 months, no captors were ever identified. Meredith Grant, 23, and Emma Reed, 22, had shared a bond formed in college at the University of Denver. Their lives were ordinary and grounded. Meredith worked in accounting, Emma cared for patients as a clinic nurse. But both were drawn to the mountains. Hiking was their refuge, their ritual. They had explored Colorado together many times and were eager to challenge themselves further. Yellowstone marked their first journey into true wilderness, an immense, sparsely developed expanse where distances stretch endlessly and help is never close. On July 9, 2004, they arrived in Meredith's aging Jeep Cherokee and stopped overnight in Gardiner, just outside the park's northern gate. The next morning, July 10, they visited a ranger station to request a backcountry permit, granting them permission to camp far from established sites. The ranger on duty, Deborah Keene, later said the women appeared calm and prepared. Their gear was solid: quality packs, a tent, sleeping bags, GPS, and detailed maps. They outlined a plan to cover roughly 50 kilometers across the Blacktail Plateau, a quiet region overlooked by most visitors because it lacked famous landmarks. Instead, it offered open meadows, thin forests, winding streams, and rolling hills, beautiful, but unforgiving. Deborah issued a 7-day permit, explained bear safety protocols, and marked designated overnight areas on the map. She cautioned them about the absence of cell service and recommended a satellite phone. They didn't have one. Their names, vehicle information, route, and expected return date, July 17, were logged. Around 11 a.m., Meredith and Emma drove to the trailhead. Their Jeep was later spotted parked along the road leading to Blacktail. The final confirmed contact came at about 2 p.m. A message reached Meredith's parents, accompanied by a photo of the two women smiling in full hiking gear at the trail's beginning. Heading out, the text read, "Almost no one here. It's beautiful. Back in a week." The photo's coordinates confirmed their location. For several days, silence followed, but this raised no alarm. In that region, communication gaps were expected. The parents had been warned. July 17 came and went. By evening, the Jeep remained unmoved. The next morning, a park visitor noticed the dust-covered vehicle and reported it. When Deborah checked the license plate, the realization struck: the hikers were overdue. Families were notified that same day. Meredith's parents drove from Denver immediately. Emma's parents flew from Oregon to Billings, then headed for the park. On July 19, a formal search began. 8 rangers and volunteers followed the route listed on the permit under clear skies and summer heat typical for Yellowstone. The early kilometers revealed nothing. The ground was too hard to preserve footprints. About 7 kilometers in, near a small pond, the searchers found tracks in the sand, 2 sets, matching the women's shoe sizes. They led to the water and back again. A routine stop. Farther along, the trail climbed and entered thicker woods. Roughly 12 kilometers from the start, the first campsite appeared. Flattened grass, peg marks, and the outline of a tent beneath pine trees told a quiet story. There was no trash, no abandoned items. Everything suggested care and order. Beyond that point, signs grew faint as the terrain turned rocky and grassy. At 18 kilometers, the trail divided. One path continued east toward a known lake. The other, narrow and subtle, curved north toward a restricted zone, an area closed due to bears and harsh conditions. It was there that the search took a darker turn. Under a tree, the women's tent was found, carefully folded and packed. 2 sleeping bags lay beside it, neatly rolled. The backpacks stood upright against the trunk, fully zipped. Inside were clothes, personal belongings, maps, a GPS unit, a first aid kit. The food supply was partly used. About 3 days' worth remained. Nothing was torn. Nothing scattered. Nature had not attacked. The wilderness had not claimed them. What remained was an unsettling stillness, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, guarding a truth meant only for those chosen to uncover it. The water bottles were still partly filled. Nothing was broken. No gear was torn or scattered. There were no marks of violence, no indication of panic. Everything suggested a conscious choice, as if the women had set their belongings down with the intention of returning shortly. But they never did. When rangers examined the GPS device, its final recorded point told a quiet but chilling story. The last saved location was marked July 11th, just after 4 p.m., and the coordinates matched exactly where the equipment had been discovered. The navigation log showed steady progress, roughly 20 kilometers covered in 2 days. A normal pace. Unhurried. Nothing reckless. With no obvious explanation, the search perimeter was widened. Teams swept a 2-kilometer radius around the site. They found no fabric, no blood, no dropped items, no trace of human presence beyond what had already been seen. It was as if Meredith and Emma had stepped beyond the visible world. On July 20th, the search escalated. A helicopter was deployed to scan the Blacktail Plateau from above, using thermal imaging to detect signs of life. The landscape revealed nothing. The following day, tracking dogs were introduced. They were given clothing from the backpacks. The dogs caught a scent near the abandoned tent and moved north, toward the restricted zone. The path grew faint, nearly erased by stone and brush. After about a kilometer, it vanished entirely among the rocks. The scent dissolved. The trail ended in silence. For 2 weeks, the effort continued without pause. Rangers, volunteers, and family members combed the land each day. Streams were followed. Ravines explored. Caves and narrow crevices were entered. Still, nothing answered back. By early August, the reality became unavoidable. Meredith and Emma were officially declared missing. In national park cases, time is merciless. When the first days yield nothing, hope fades quickly. In a place as vast as Yellowstone, a body can remain hidden for decades. The investigation was handed over to the National Park Service's Special Unit. The official explanation was simple and impersonal. The women likely left their route and encountered a fatal accident, a bear, a fall, fast-moving water. The terrain, it was said, had swallowed the evidence. The families refused to accept it. Private search teams returned in September. Winter came. The forest kept its secret. Then, 2 years later, the silence broke. June 3, 2006. Just after dawn, on a service road near the edge of the restricted area, communications technician Robert Jansen was driving to inspect relay towers. Around 7 in the morning, something appeared ahead of him, unmoving at first, then swaying. A woman stood barefoot on the road. Her clothes were shredded and filthy. Her body was skeletal. Long, knotted hair hung down her back. She staggered forward, clutching herself as if holding her body together by will alone. Robert stopped abruptly. When he stepped out, the woman collapsed to her knees. He rushed to her, lifted her gently, and brought her to the car. He gave her water. She drank desperately, choking between gulps. When he asked her questions, her mouth moved, but no voice emerged. He radioed for help, gave his location, and waited. Within 20 minutes, rangers arrived with a medic. She was transported to the station, then flown to a hospital in Billings. The examination revealed the cost of survival. She weighed just 39 kilograms at a height of 165 centimeters. Her body bore old scars. Her limbs showed signs of long-term starvation. Her gums bled. Her teeth were damaged. Her hair was matted to her waist. Her mind drifted between moments, fractured by trauma. For a full day, she barely spoke. She drank water cautiously. Doctors fed her slowly, fearing the shock that sudden nourishment can cause after prolonged deprivation. On the second day, she finally formed words strong enough to carry meaning. Her name, she said, was Meredith Grant. Rangers ran her name through the national database for the missing. The system returned a result almost immediately. Meredith Grant. 23 years old when she vanished in July 2004. Missing for 23 months. DNA samples were taken and compared against biological traces recovered from the items left behind in her backpack. The result was absolute. A complete match. There was no doubt. She had returned. Her parents were informed on the third day. They flew from Denver to Billings without delay. When her mother entered the room and saw her daughter, her body gave out beneath her. Her father wept openly. Meredith recognized them. Her eyes followed them. But her face remained still, as if emotion had been sealed somewhere far beyond reach. A psychologist was assigned immediately, along with an investigator from the National Park Service. His name was Marcus Hall. He had spent more than 15 years working cases where people vanished into silence. He did not interrogate her. He did not push. He simply stayed near, letting his presence become familiar. He spoke softly. He waited. On the 5th day, Meredith's words began to come back in fragments that finally aligned into meaning. The first sentence she gave him changed everything. "They kept us," she said. "They weren't visitors. They live out there." Marcus asked her to begin at the beginning and take as much time as she needed. Meredith spoke slowly. Long pauses filled the room. Sometimes minutes passed without sound. Marcus wrote without interrupting. She told him that on July 11th, she and Emma were following the route exactly as planned. That afternoon, they reached a split in the trail. Curiosity guided them north. They intended to explore briefly, then return. They left their tent and most of their gear beneath a tree, carrying only water and a small pack of food. The path was faint but visible. After about a kilometer, the forest opened into a clearing. They sat in the grass to eat. That was when the others appeared. 3 figures emerged from the trees. 2 men. 1 woman. Their clothing was wrong, rough, handmade, stitched from skins and scraps of fabric. The men were unwashed, bearded. The woman's hair hung wild and tangled. They carried no packs. No tools that suggested hiking. Meredith and Emma assumed, at first, that they might be lost travelers. Or people living apart from society. They tried to speak. They offered help. The strangers said nothing. They moved closer. One of the men, tall, his beard reaching his chest, finally spoke. "Come with us." Meredith refused. She explained they had their own route. Emma offered food and water. The man's voice hardened. "Come with us," he repeated. "Or it will be worse." The second man drew a blade from his belt. Long, crude. Heavy. He stepped between the women and the path back. In that moment, Meredith understood. This was not negotiation. It was capture. Emma saw it too. They exchanged a glance. There was no one to hear them scream. Only miles of forest breathing around them. They obeyed. For nearly 2 hours, they were led through the wilderness along paths that barely existed. No one spoke. Meredith tried to memorize direction, terrain, anything that could later become an escape. But the land folded in on itself, trees, stones, streams repeating until nothing stood apart. They crossed water, climbed ridges, descended into shadowed valleys. At last, they reached a place hidden from the world. Shelters were carved into the hillside, covered with earth and logs. Old structures leaned under the weight of time. In the center, a fire pit smoldered beneath a hanging pot. Lines of rope stretched between trees with skins and clothing drying in the open air. More people watched them arrive. Meredith counted roughly 10, adults and teenagers. Men and women. All dressed the same way. All silent. All expressionless. They were taken underground. The dugout was small and wet, reeking of decay. Skins lay on the floor. A single bucket stood in the corner. The door closed from the outside and was sealed with a log. For the first days, Meredith and Emma tried to understand the rules of this place. Food came once a day, boiled roots, unfamiliar meat, water. They were escorted when allowed outside. Speech was forbidden. Questions earned nothing but silence or force. Each attempt to resist was met the same way, pushed back into darkness. And slowly, they began to understand that this forest did not merely hide danger. It protected it. After 7 days, an older woman, older than the rest, perhaps nearing 50, finally spoke to Meredith. Her English was fractured, her voice flat. "You stay here. You work. You try to leave, you die." Nothing more was explained. From that moment on, the rules became clear without being written. Their labor was simple and endless, hauling firewood, carrying water from the stream, scraping and cleaning animal skins, helping prepare whatever food there was. They were never free. At night, they were locked inside the dugout. By day, one of the men watched from a distance, always close enough to intervene. Any step beyond the invisible boundary of the settlement was answered with force. Emma struggled almost immediately. As a nurse, she understood what was happening to her body. The meals were scarce. The water was often foul. Cleanliness did not exist. Within weeks, Emma grew weak. The cough came first. Then fever. Then exhaustion so deep she could barely stand. Meredith pleaded, first for medicine, then for better food, then simply to let Emma go. No one answered. The silence was absolute. By September of 2004, Emma was failing. She no longer rose from the skins on the floor. Blood stained her coughs. Her thoughts drifted in and out of coherence. Meredith begged again, breaking herself open in front of people who did not look back. They brought water. Sometimes thin broth. Nothing else. At the end of September, Emma died. She lay in the corner of the dugout, gasping, wheezing, each breath a battle. Meredith held her hand until the struggle stopped. When morning came, Meredith screamed. She struck the door. She demanded to be released. Hours passed before it opened. 2 men entered, lifted Emma's body, and carried her away. Meredith tried to follow. They shoved her back and sealed the door again. She never saw what became of her friend. Only sounds echoed from beyond the settlement, metal against earth, the rhythm of digging. For a day, the smell of decay hung in the air. Then it vanished. After that, Meredith was alone. The work did not end. It multiplied. She became the only one hauling water and wood, the only one cleaning skins. They stopped locking her inside constantly. When the weather warmed, she slept near the hearth. The watch remained, looser but unbroken. Someone was always close enough to stop her. Time dissolved. Seasons turned without names. Autumn bled into winter. Snow buried the valley. The dugout froze at night. Food grew scarcer. Her body thinned. Frost burned her toes. She fell more than once and lived anyway. Spring returned. Then summer. Then autumn again. Sometime during the winter of 2005, she noticed a shift. The watching eyes lingered less. She was no longer a prisoner in their minds, only a presence, woven into routine. Sometimes they sent her alone to collect water. They believed she would not run. After all, the forest surrounded everything. No paths. No signs. No direction. But Meredith had never stopped preparing. She watched the land. She memorized it. The settlement lay deep in a bowl of hills. The stream flowed west. Streams fed rivers. Rivers led outward, to roads, to people, to life. In March of 2006, as the snow softened and retreated, she chose. She was sent for water. The stream lay 300 meters away. She carried the bucket as usual. When she reached the water, she looked around. No one followed. She let the bucket fall. And she ran. Barefoot. Light clothing. Cold air cutting her lungs. She slipped, fell, rose again. Shouts erupted behind her. They had seen. She ran harder. The stream guided her, just as she had believed it would. It carried her to the river. She followed the river through tangled brush, stepping into freezing water when fallen trees blocked the bank. She walked until night swallowed the land. She hid beneath a fallen trunk, shaking uncontrollably, but she did not stop. At dawn, she walked again. On the second day, the forest opened. A road appeared. Unpaved, quiet, but real. She followed it for hours until a vehicle emerged, Robert's. Marcus Hall listened as Meredith spoke. He asked questions only when needed. She answered when she could. Sometimes tears replaced words. Sometimes silence stretched for minutes at a time. The story came in fragments over several days. Her strength failed often. Sleep claimed her mid-sentence. When her testimony was complete, it was checked. The details aligned. Marcus assembled a trained, armed search unit. Meredith sketched what she remembered, the path they had walked, the bend of the stream, the valley where the settlement slept unseen. The forest had hidden them for years. But it had not erased the truth. And Meredith, against all reason, had returned to speak it. In mid-June of 2006, a recovery team was assembled, 12 park rangers joined by 2 sheriff's deputies. They moved out with tracking dogs, GPS units, medical supplies, and radio equipment, guided by Meredith's recollections. Following her account, they located the stream and traced it upstream. After 2 days of travel, the terrain opened into a familiar formation, a sunken valley ringed by hills, dense forest pressing in on all sides, water running through its center like a vein. As they descended, signs of habitation began to surface. The settlement was there, but lifeless. The dugout stood empty. The central hearth was cold, its ashes long undisturbed. The structures showed no recent use. Whoever had lived there had vanished. During the search, the team uncovered remnants of daily life, torn clothing, crude tools, scattered cookware, animal bones. Inside one dugout, they found a fragment of a faded women's t-shirt. Part of a University of Denver emblem was still visible. Emma Reed's parents later confirmed it matched a shirt their daughter had packed for the hike. Roughly 50 meters from the settlement, beneath a stand of trees, the ground dipped unnaturally. Rangers uncovered a shallow grave. Inside lay human remains, a skeleton with partially preserved clothing. DNA analysis confirmed what everyone feared. The remains belonged to Emma Reed. Medical examination indicated death from a severe lung infection, likely pneumonia. There were no fractures, no defensive wounds, no evidence of homicide. Emma had died from illness, exactly as Meredith had described. The site appeared recently abandoned, perhaps only weeks earlier, based on the level of decay and disturbance. Rangers expanded their sweep, searching a 10-kilometer radius. They discovered additional supply caches and traces of temporary camps, but no living person. The months that followed were filled with interviews and inquiries. Rangers, maintenance workers, and nearby residents were questioned repeatedly. Slowly, fragments of memory surfaced. One veteran ranger, stationed in the park's northern sector since the early 1990s, recalled encountering a group fitting Meredith's description back in 1997. At the time, he assumed they were rule-breaking visitors and attempted to approach them. They disappeared into the forest before contact could be made. He dismissed it then as harmless isolation, hermits, perhaps. Another guide remembered finding a strange encampment in 2003 while leading tourists near Blacktail Plateau. Dugouts. A fire pit. No people. He reported it. By the time rangers arrived, it was already abandoned. A working theory began to take shape. An insular group. Closed off. Living beyond the reach of society for years, possibly decades. People who had chosen disappearance, whether to evade the law, follow extreme beliefs, or withdraw due to instability. They knew the land intimately. They survived quietly. They avoided attention. The FBI became involved, cross-referencing missing persons databases in search of links. Nothing definitive emerged. The data was too sparse. By autumn of 2006, active efforts were halted. Officially, the case remained open. In reality, it went dormant. Yellowstone was vast enough to erase anyone who wished to remain unseen. Emma Reed's death was formally confirmed. Her remains were returned to her family for burial. The isolated group theory was accepted as the most plausible explanation. No arrests were made. Public access to the area was restricted, justified by wildlife concerns. Meredith Grant entered a long process of physical recovery and psychological repair. Her body healed. Her mind carried scars that did not fade, nightmares, panic, a constant sense of threat. She refused interviews. She withdrew from the public eye. In 2007, she returned to Denver to live with her parents, altered her appearance, and adopted a new name. On paper, the case was marked resolved. One victim had survived. The other had been recovered. Emma's parents filed a lawsuit against the National Park Service, alleging negligence and insufficient safety measures. The case was settled privately. The terms were never released. And the forest, once again, kept what remained. One ranger who participated in the search later spoke anonymously on a documentary podcast about disappearances in national parks. His words carried no drama, only warning. "We look for solitary attackers," he said, "for predators who pass through. But the most dangerous are those who chose to vanish completely. They know the land. They function as a unit. And you never see them coming." His comment opens a door that is rarely examined. Across the millions of acres preserved as wilderness, how much remains unseen? How many people exist beyond records, beyond maps, beyond law? How many isolated communities have carved out lives in places no one monitors? And how often do visitors cross their paths, only to never return and explain what they saw? According to official National Park Service data, between 200 and 300 people are reported missing in U.S. national parks each year. Most reappear within days. Roughly 10% are later found deceased, falls, exposure, accidents. But around 5% are never located at all. Their files remain open for decades, unresolved. How many of that silent fraction encountered something like what Meredith and Emma did? How many were taken, held, erased? Meredith survived not because she was stronger. She survived because she endured. For nearly 2 years, she complied. She worked. She resisted quietly. She conserved herself. She waited for vigilance to weaken, for familiarity to breed carelessness. And when the moment finally arrived, she moved. Emma never reached that point. Her body failed after 3 months. In the modern world, pneumonia is rarely fatal. With antibiotics, it is treatable in days. In a dugout, without medicine, without nutrition, without care, it becomes a sentence. Emma's death was not mysterious. It was inevitable under those conditions. The disappearance of Meredith Grant and Emma Reed remains one of Yellowstone's most unsettling cases, not because of the supernatural, not because of legends or unexplained forces. It endures because of something far more real. The presence of people living beyond the system. Groups who exist outside law, outside visibility, deep within protected wilderness. Groups capable of capturing travelers and holding them indefinitely. Why they do it remains unclear. Labor. Control. Fear. Belief. Conviction. Meredith could not say. Those people rarely spoke. They offered no reasons, no justifications. They behaved as though captivity was routine, as though they had done it before. Perhaps Meredith and Emma were not the first. Perhaps others came earlier. Others who now exist only as unresolved cases within that missing 5%. Today, the Blacktail Plateau region remains restricted. Officially, the closure is attributed to unstable terrain and wildfire risk. Unofficially, it is understood that the danger may not be environmental at all. The National Park Service offers no public commentary. Families involved have been advised to remain silent. Coverage of the case appears sparingly, carefully phrased. Still, details continue to surface. Visitors planning trips to Yellowstone sometimes ask rangers about safety in remote areas. The answers are predictable. Stay on marked trails. File itineraries. Carry communication devices. Do not hike alone. But occasionally, after a pause, an unspoken warning slips through. If you encounter people who look out of place, who do not resemble hikers, avoid engagement. Do not approach. Leave immediately. If they follow, run. If your path is blocked, shout. Use a whistle. Draw attention at all costs. These are not official guidelines. They are quiet instructions, passed from experienced rangers to newcomers. They are shaped by incidents that never reach reports. And by truths the forest does not willingly give back.